the Economic Development Committee, and I'm joined here by Councilor Nave, Councilor Jones-Rouser, President Hudson, my good friend Councilor Majok, Councilor Paniagua, Councilor Montel, and Councilor Williams. A good turnout for this committee meeting, right, President? What do you think?
Absolutely.
I know, and we're here, of course, with Mr. Dishaw, who's in charge of our zoning office, and a myriad of other things. So, Jake, why don't you just go over? I know it's like you gave us. I gave us a lot of information here. I did go through the rezone and the highlighted sections, but maybe this is a general overview that you distributed to us would help out.
Sure, that sounds good. Jake Dishaw, Deputy Commissioner of Code Enforcement and Zoning Administration. So as a zoning administrator, we will go through a summary of the changes. Up on the screen is the full version. So if there's anything that we want to look at more closely for the full version, we can pull it up on the screen. But I'll hit the highlights and we can go through anything from there. Starting with just overall changes to the entire document, corrected some Scrivener errors or grammatical errors and omissions from the original document. We're changing references about zone districts from zoning district to zone district itself. Changing references from use to use type as appropriate. Corrected internal and external cross references in the text and in the tables within, and removed all references to the administrative manual, which we don't have. It was never completed, so we've stopped making reference to that for the time being. That jumps to Article 1, officially changing the name from ReZone to the City of Syracuse zoning ordinance and official map to the City of Syracuse zoning ordinance. So ReZone was the process in getting to a new code, so we're officially going to stop calling it that, officially make the document known as the Syracuse zoning ordinance. We clarified that compliance with all applicable codes and laws is required for any development. I'll give you a brief reason why. So somebody wants to come in for a special use permit in a mixed-use building, but they don't have a certificate of use for the bar on the first floor, or the store, or the building doesn't have their 3-year state-mandated certificate of compliance. The code clarifies now that like you need to follow all state, federal, local laws to then be in compliance or to establish something within the code. It just helps us get overall compliance and not give somebody something when they owe us something, if that makes sense. And revised the nonconformity section. So that's it to Article 1. Article 2, clarifying some language within zone districts, base zone districts. Again, some of this is really technical stuff, but the process to get through this is actual use case scenarios. Like we've put the code to use in an actual situation that we've dealt with over the last year and said this needs to be updated or changed or clarified or slightly edited. So a lot of this is, some of it's technical, like legal changes to actual text, rather than a large scale of substance. So not to bore you to death, but some of that stuff is definitely needed as well along the way. We've revised our dimensional standards and setbacks for principal and accessory structures, clarified and revised the lot size minimums and roof heights in certain zone districts, clarified and revised minimum stories required and maximum lot coverage. So again, I'll just give you a real life example. Lafayette Hills wants to develop housing. That's not news to anybody, but they want to do clusters of townhouses, and they want it, so cluster of 4. In the center units, they wanted smaller units so they could have different price ranges. So people that want a smaller unit can pay less. People that want an end cap unit with 3 or 4 bedrooms can pay more. The problem is some of our dimensional standards didn't allow for that. It had to be a minimum of 25 feet wide. So we were proposing to change that down to 20 to meet that need. So that's just one example or one actual use case
Jake,
scenario.
on a situation like that, I mean, I can see there be a variety of situations that might pop up like that, but we have to change the code, or couldn't you do an administrative adjustment for something like that?
There are some things that do allow administrative adjustment from myself. Other things actually need the text amendments, and that's one of them, because it's in the table. It says, or you could go for a variance, but we don't want to send people to variances for something that we think is a standard. Kind of nationally, we looked at and said other places are allowing townhouses, which, they share a common wall, which is the property line, to be smaller than 25 feet, some even less than 20.
Yeah, well,
But yeah,
why don't you get through what you got to
Yeah,
get
there are
through,
many
because it's sort of
instances
like
where we do issue a lot of administrative approvals, and we do have administrative adjustments, which is, if you look at our Board of Zoning Appeals schedule, it's a very small number of meetings and items on those meetings. Many times we've canceled the BZA meeting because we don't have any items for them to hear. So that itself, if you look at that over the last 2 years, I don't know how many we've had total, but in, let's say, 26 months of rezone, I don't know that we've had 15 items on BZA total. So, but again, that just kind of gets to overall what you're saying.
it's always a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. We don't want people that want to do projects here to have to get a variance. We want the code to apply the way we want the city to look. So I think that's what you're seeing. But I'll continue to go through this. We've made some adjustments to the planned institutional district, so PID. Think large institutions, Syracuse University, St. Joe's. We did work closely with some of those institutions on some of those changes, and we're in agreement, so that's a good thing. Updated and revised, again, the standards within PID zone districts, and clarified that, with some exceptions, that the rest of the code applies in PIDs unless strictly noted. Again, just to kind of clean up some areas of what's applicable in a PID and what isn't. Moving on to Article 3, clarified prohibited uses, revised the use table. So we added some new use types, and included adding special use permit requirements for various use types. So to just explain that, uses are permitted by right or by special use permit. If you need a special use permit, it doesn't mean it's not allowed. It just means you got to go through the process, which this body hears as the final decision maker on special use permits. So the table itself has a P for permitted or an S for special use permit. And if it doesn't have either one of those, then it's not allowed. So we just cleaned that up a little bit. Added use specific regulations for the new use types. So again, something may be permitted by right or by special use permit, but it has some use specific language that you have to follow and meet. For example, live entertainment within 300 feet of a residential zone district. That'd be a use specific standard or language that's added for that type of use, just as an example. So certain uses have some specific regulations that follow them. We revised the multi-unit dwelling use specific regulation and to rename mixed income development and clarified its applicability. Clarified regulations governing residential commercial use types. So we're treating rental property as a commercial business when it comes to doing land use approvals. So expansion, and this is in relation to us eliminating and deleting the definition of family out of our land use code. We're no longer, if you recall, we're no longer trying to determine who's related to who, how many people, 18 and older, unrelated, we're not doing that. We were never doing that, to be clear. What we are doing is regulating the property for its intensity of use and density of use. So how many bedrooms? So if you're going to add bedrooms to a rental, and this is citywide, you have to meet certain standards like off-street parking, lot size, common area, things that tie into and match the property maintenance code. So that's how we're handling how a unit can be used. And by our way of doing that is treating it as a business instead of regulating blood relation, if that makes sense. And some of this I've talked about before, and again, it's really kind of deep in the weeds, but just to clarify that we did make some changes there. Same thing, again, some changes for accessory structures, use specific regulations for certain uses, added new definitions for convenience store, grocery store, restaurant. I'm not going to read all of this, but One big one is we had smaller food and beverage corner stores try to tell us that they were a grocery store to get out of coming before you for a special use permit. So we've kind of clarified those definitions and make it clear on what is a grocery store and what isn't. Not that we're trying to limit people that want to sell fresh foods. That's not what, these were straight corner stores that we're trying to get around the process, to be clear. And we felt like we needed to make this change so that those types of businesses have to get a special use permit.
Does smoking establishment take in like cannabis
Yes.
retailers?
Yes. Right. What's that? Hookah as well. Good one.
Jake, where does it state something about neighborhood markets? What, is that the corner stores?
Yeah, so we're changing food and beverage retail, which was the use of corner store, to neighborhood market. And then a grocery store is now officially like more like what you would all think as a supermarket, a grocery store, which we need more of, right? But yeah, so we're calling it, we're now going to call that, upon your approval, hopefully, a neighborhood market instead of food and beverage retail. But that's a corner store.
Okay, just to get back to the cannabis situation, so do they need a special permit to open?
Yes, right?
Or are they just governed by state law?
Well, we can check. Can we pull that up? Hold on one second. I just want to make sure.
I'm just like,
Go-
has a prevailing fear that we're going to end up having a market.
So right now, just what we're doing right now currently is any smoking establishment for cannabis, if it's a dispensary, one, they need to prove that they meet all the state requirements because we didn't exempt out as a municipality. And we would treat it as retail general, but they would also need a business certificate of use. But now we're creating, hold on, we got the use table pulled up.
And they also have all the state regulations as to
They-
footage
they
from
do.
School, et cetera,
Yeah,
et cetera.
but we check all that as well to make sure, because we get, similar to notices of intent for liquor license, we get the same thing for OCM cannabis license, where the municipality can comment. Actually, all of you can comment. I think you get those, but police can comment, fire can comment, code enforcement can comment, and sometimes we do. We send these boards, we're having issues with this place, or we don't think this is a good location, for example, but so it's a use type under retail sales. You can see at the bottom where it says smoking establishment. It does need a special use permit in MX 2, 3, and 4, permitted by right, and is that MX 5, and then permitted by right in commercial and industrial? So does that answer your question?
Well,
It's not permitted in any R district or in MX 1.
Okay,
If it's in MX 2, 3, or 4, it needs a special use permit. If it's in MX 5, which is dense, think downtown, it's permitted by right. If it's in commercial, permitted by right. Industrial, permitted by right.
there's nothing in our codes that would prevent, obviously the convenience stores or anything like that, but is there any kind of credibility or credence given to the amount of activity in one area? I'm thinking like the convenience stores that are on every block. We don't, how do we do, is there any controlling mechanism to
For
that?
cannabis, or are you strictly corner stores?
Let's
or
go
both?
corner stores, but I was also thinking of cannabis too.
Well, cannabis has to follow the state OCM regulations, which I think does consider proximity to other
Okay,
uses,
okay.
which we do verify, but we make sure we get an okay from OCM before we move anything forward. Related to food and beverage retail, currently what we want to change and call neighborhood market, otherwise known as a corner store. Right now, there is not any sort of mechanism for the density of those or how many there are. It's something we've talked about. Yeah, but if they sell tobacco, to Corp Counsel's point, tobacco we are, but they could simply say we're not going to sell tobacco and move forward, and we inspect for that and make sure places that do come forward. You see some special use permits, people that are proposing new corner stores, where we tell them flat out, you are not eligible to get a tobacco license. You can operate everything else retail related to a corner store, but you can't sell tobacco, because that does have a distancing requirement and a cap on it under our newer tobacco ordinance. But overall, there is nothing else currently. We've talked about it. It's because, as many of you have seen, we've had problems with some of our stores around the city, and they suck up a lot of resources from a lot of different departments, whether it's emergency response, code enforcement, or just general issues in neighborhoods, right? Noise, litter, sometimes violence. Corp Council's reminded me, Liquor Authority has distancing requirements too. So I would say taking those out of it, if they're not selling tobacco, cannabis, well, it can't be a corner store selling cannabis. We're shutting those ones down. A dispensary has distancing requirements. Anybody selling alcohol, distancing requirements, tobacco. But if they're not selling that stuff, we currently don't have any prohibition other than the use table. But we've talked about it, and it's something that I think in the future we can have discussion on. Do we want to put a cap? Do we want, a moratorium?
I think it's worth talking about.
So Jake, a
Definitely.
neighborhood market is prohibited from selling liquor and tobacco. Am I right?
No,
Well,
they just
or
need
do
they need
have to
additional
go-
approvals for those, and those specific sales have to meet certain criteria in order to get approval.
Okay.
So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, this question is probably gonna go into the, events, portion of the packet, but based on the smoking, though, there's like traveling, bars, not bars like liquor, but like cigar establishments, traveling hookah lounge establishments. So how does any of that fit into what
When
What
you say
criteria?
traveling, do you mean like pop-up?
pop-up, or like say you have a wedding and you want a cigar lounge at your wedding?
Oh, okay.
Or certain nationalities, they have hookah traveling people that come there and set up hookahs.
So, got it. That would probably fall under what we're proposing to create for event space usage. Currently, we have indoor and outdoor recreation, and that sort of flex event space doesn't really fit that use. It's for like actual physical like activity, like think rock climbing, for example, inside. That's indoor recreation. So what we're doing is proposing event space use and where that can be allowed and where it can't. And then it can have that sort of flexible use for an event, if that's what you mean. If it's strictly going to be like, I'm going to just host private parties and be more like a bar or restaurant, then like we would, based on what an applicant or developer wants to do, we try to fit them into the most applicable use category. But what was missing is we didn't really have a flat out event space
Yeah.
to put them in. They were falling under, like I said, recreation, indoor and outdoor recreation. It doesn't really fit that use type. So what we're doing is creating that, and we could talk about, where we don't want to allow those, but those types of uses, many of them would need special use permits within certain districts, I think, especially within close proximity to residential use. But other than that, we're trying to make them permissible. We're not trying to not allow somebody to have a successful business doing that. It's just we didn't have a specific use. So we are proposing that.
Yeah, I've seen the event space added. I just wanted to know about the smoking portion of that. Well, because smoking stuff establishment was in here with the redactions. And so I just wanted to know about that part, but that's probably something we can discuss
Yeah.
further.
Okay.
You up to four?
Yeah, we're up to 4. So
Well, hold on a second. Let me go stick in 3. So we discussed, it's also in 4, I believe, as well, but we have previously discussed some 10, the vehicles and equipment spaces. So automobile places. And we had discussed repair shops versus junk storage spaces. So I know junk storage is separate, and then vehicles is one. Did we address any of the concerns that a lot of these, and I don't know the
Yep.
level of how an automobile place falls in place, but some of the light auto repair places storing junk vehicles for over 30 days or more?
Yeah, so one thing in particular that we're proposing within these changes that I think will specifically address that is all these light-duty auto repair places need or have special use permits. Some of them got special use permits from a long time ago, right? Like 50 years ago, maybe more. Those haven't been renewed because currently the way it's written is special use permits run with the land, meaning if they got a special use permit in 1972, they still have that approval and nothing triggering changing it unless you choose to revoke it completely. What we're asking to do in the code with these changes is that special use permits would be renewable every 30 months, meaning every 30 months we'd be taking a look, making sure that they're continuing to meet their conditions of approval and their site plan and that they're maintaining a clean, good business and they get an automatic renewal. If not, we bring them back to Planning Commission for consideration and then ultimately back to you all on a decision if they remain open. So that's one part of it, but the second part of it is it triggers a specific review from zoning and from code enforcement. Right now, I'll be honest, like a special use permit issued in 1972, unless I get a complaint about a place, like there's no trigger for me to explicitly review that for anything or any problems, right? But now if we put this change in, every 30 months we're reviewing them.
But don't they have to go to the DMV?
Well, yeah,
To
but I
like
mean,
get every 5 years or something like that?
yeah, and sometimes we hear from the DMV, but other times, I mean, we don't
Well, the
hear.
DMV doesn't say, hey, these guys got a special use permit or to actually operate or nothing?
Sometimes the DMV will reach out and ask if we've approved a place to be something, but that, you know, and sometimes we reach out to them as well to ask, hey, does this place have any record of, you know, doing any auto repair or not? But we don't hear from them a lot.
So,
Right.
okay.
Right.
One thing we did, and this is going back a couple of years now, Counselor Jones-Rouser, but Syracuse United Neighbors had a few locations within their district that were light duty that were kind of exactly what you're saying, like getting out of control, storing more junk, like, you know, having issues. So what we did with those is we went around and we sent them their special use permit and said, here are your conditions of approval, and it issued violations based on that or any property maintenance code enforcement violations, and we got those cleaned up. But what this would do is bring them back before a reviewing body potentially if there are problems, and potentially, you know, saying no. Like, something's no longer going to have lifelong automatic approval is what I'm saying. These would be administrative reviews that could come back before this body every 30 months if a property that has one of those special use permits is a problem. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say that those same entities that Sun probably had an issue with changed hands
Okay.
over the years, and they're back to the same stuff. Again, before we jump into 4, and general use for all accessory, are we past ADUs to that's in 4? So I just want to talk about the ADUs.
So accessory dwelling units are allowed. We just haven't, we've issued one, and it was from a Sedgwick area home with a huge garage in the back. I think people would like to do them, but the cost of actually building an ADU is like putting a large addition on your home. Like, it's going to cost you an extensive amount of money, and I think that's why we're not seeing them. Talk to Albany and Rochester folks as well. They're same thing. They're just not. They're not seeing them.
Well, one of the things that I was looking at in this is from C, CB, it says that if the principal use structure is destroyed, abandoned, or removed, the accessory use structure shall no longer be allowed. Now, I'm just thinking like if it's a ADU, residential ADU, and say my daughter lives in my ADU, my house catches fire, I can't live inside of my ADU until my home is repaired?
No, I think it just means long-term, it can't just stay like a shed, a garage, an ADU, that if it requires a home on there, that at some point we need to get a home back on there. We would never force somebody to not live somewhere during a time of planning to rebuild a property. That's not what that means. It just means, let's say I have a big detached 4-car garage in my backyard and the house burns down. I can't just leave it and now use that garage as like a commercial garage to store my, lawn mowing company equipment in.
Okay.
That I have to put a house back on it.
Also, the language of 50% or 1,000 square foot, 800 square foot, like all of those seem to be contradictory or confusing. So I don't
You mean
even know.
the threshold for when you can rebuild and can't? When you,
No, the size of the ADU.
oh, okay. Yeah, what we want it proportionate. We did a lot of data research on this. Basically, we don't want an ADU to be, disproportionate to the size of the home or just this massive accessory dwelling unit that's almost bigger than the home. Most homes, what was the average? 1,300 or less, 1,200 or so? Yeah. But yeah, we want the accessory dwelling units to be proportionate and to fit the main structure, if that makes sense. So you can have a bigger one up to 800 if you have a big home. If you don't, it has to be slightly less, just so we don't have, think about like an
1,100
1,100.
square feet.
Yes.
So that's where it's confusing at, because one part says 1,000 square feet. I don't know if there's a minimum and a maximum. I don't know if it's residential or non-residential.
Oh, okay. I think there's two different aspects of that. There's accessory dwelling units and then there's accessory structures, two different things. One, somebody's living in, the other one, they're not.
Which one is which, please?
So the 800 is the ADU, the other one is everything else that's not being lived in.
Okay, so the 800 is the residential ADU.
And we got one of them so far?
We've approved one in Sedgwick.
Okay, so that's good. So
And just one more question on that.
on the ADU, Counselor?
On the size, yes.
Oh, okay.
So based on, because I know that we're looking at it probably like within certain size lots of majority of the land here. But some lots are extremely deep. And it's not, say I wanted to I have a really deep lot, say 300 or 400 feet back, and I want to put an ADU further back. It's not next to or
Yeah,
really close to the property.
You can
so
do that. The square footage maximum is in relation to the floor area of the main house, not the lot.
I know that.
Yeah,
but that's where I.
if
that's
you have
where
a huge lot that's so deep, you could put your ADU way in the back as long as
That's
you
what I'm
meet.
saying. Where is there an exception where it could be slightly larger if it's
Oh.
not so close to the property and it's deeper in the lot?
I consider
I know
one, but I don't have a
height-wise-
backyard.
Yeah.
I know height-wise you don't want to go. So
I hear that. Well, where we landed on it is no more than 800. And to put that in perspective, think about a hotel room is usually around like just over like maybe 300 square feet. Not that like we want people living in hotel rooms. I'm just trying to give some perspective on like what 800 square feet can get you. Nationally and what we adopted, we felt like 800 is a good maximum. But, if we if we have a scenario where somebody has a huge lot and they want to put something larger, what we want to avoid is kind of what happened here after the war. A lot of, and I mean World War II, a lot of housing got built, like full-size houses, right? And we've got a full-size house in the front, and then 30 feet behind it, there's another full-size house. That is something that we want to promote density, but not like that. We can talk about it. I mean, if there's something we want to change or add.
I
but-
think I share some of Councilor Jones-Rouser's concerns. I met with Owen probably a month, 2 months back to talk about ADUs in particular. And, you mentioned the cost, and there surely is a lot of costs involved with, either converting a property, building a property to be an ADU. But I think that we might be hindering our own efforts here by some of the code that we have here. Just kind of maybe a larger conversation for another day.
After 27 months, we've had one application. So,
What's your concerns, Councilor Williams? Something like that.
Councilor Monto and I were just saying, I feel like what we have in front of us feels like more than one committee meeting.
Yeah, well, I think we all agree on that. Right. We went through a whole year and a half process or whatever process on this thing. And then, no offense to Jake or anything like that. I know we had to review it, but as I was looking through all this that was presented to us, I think we have to adhere to a policy, housing policy, and I'm sure the commissioner would agree with me, where we want to go. And the policy in the text has been changed to redefine that maybe. I think we have to be all in agreement where we want to go. And the ADU is, even though there's only one, do we?
There's one, and one,
Yeah,
an application was put in our neighborhood that they haven't been able to quite get there. And, I think about where do we want to go? We
Right.
talk about the housing crisis that we're in. And, I commend y'all for taking the Lafayette Hills example and saying, here's a situation that we can make a modification and promote the development of more housing. I like that. And I think that, we need to have but we have to have a comprehensive approach and strategy to how can we maybe with this document be able to promote more development of housing in our city. I think I'm a fan of upzoning. I think that we need density. I think that we can think about potential areas within the city that we can upzone to try to entice more development, denser development. One of the things that Owen shared with me is that ADUs aren't going to solve our housing crisis, and I agree with him on that one. But it's a little bit here and a little bit there, and what can we do to keep pushing in the right direction?
Yeah, so Michael Collins, Commissioner for Neighborhood and Business Development, really appreciate, in fact, absolutely love the fact that you guys are, as a body, saying, hey, we got to make sure this matches what our housing goals are. And so to that end, what I can tell you is that as this team is doing this work, working directly with our planning division and working directly with our neighborhood division and understanding how this does affect, positive or negative, what those goals are. So that's exactly the lens that we take through this. ADUs are a perfect example of where there may be a concern about the size. With the fact that we've only had 2 applications, that means that we haven't had anybody come forward and say, geez, I would do this if I could get another 200 square feet. What the news has told us and reported accurately is that we've had tremendous growth in our property values. What they have not reported that is also accurate is we still are kind of in the bottom third of the nation for property values when it comes to rent and sale price. And so what that means is we need to find ways to recognize the fact that the financial markets and what it costs to build, those things still are struggling to line up. They're getting closer than they used to be, but we're not there yet. And so Jake had pointed out earlier the fact that for when we're dealing with townhouses, we had a request come forward to saying, hey, would you look at 20 feet for the frontage? We went and did the research. That included going back and talking to Owen, Deputy Commissioner Kearney, it was like, yeah, like 20 feet, it really is where we should have landed in the first place. You know, we couldn't get everything perfect, so we ended up at 25. But that's what nationally, we're seeing those numbers work. A long way for me to say, this is all through the lens. Everything we're seeing here is through the lens of how do we incentivize good development. Friday was a wonderful example of just the way that everybody wants a piece of Syracuse right now. We had the Black Blitz over the south side. I ended up over at Northeast Community Center. We just had for a job fair that was happening there. We've got stuff going on Thursday night with the ribbon cutting for the new tech garden. It's happening. This document is allowing us to be much more efficient with how we can make sure that that happens, because time is also money for the developers.
Commissioner, I agree with you totally on that. And I think we all got to
I
recognize.
thought you would. You're a
there's-
smart guy.
Yeah, well, God bless you. You are Irish. But we're, I think we got to be cognizant that we got this frame of time. We have a time, and we should take advantage of this. And like I was looking earlier, I mean, when we get to the other articles, we have 30 business days where an application can be approved. I think we got to shorten that amount. I know it's difficult, might put a lot of stress on Jake's staff, but there's certain things that we got to get out the door in order to create housing and commercial opportunities. And I've also said, I mean, with new entrepreneurs, especially folks in the minority population, concierge part idea has always been my idea, to walk people through the process
Sure.
as far as businesses go.
So to that end, we've done a lot of cross-training within NBD so that the business development's got a good idea of where and when to hand people off to the zoning department, and just make sure we've got lots of points of entry for exactly that concierge service, because that's absolutely a goal of ours. Speeding up time, honestly, just with what our current constraints are when it comes to staffing levels, that's going to be a real challenge. And so we are, we've all had lots of discussions around where the right places are to generate expenses. This is a place that generates a lot of revenue. But right now we've got constraints on just how much staffing we can actually put towards it.
So, Councilor, you okay now, Councilor Jones-Rouser? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go to on Article
You
4.
can go to 4. I might have to come back to 2.
Okay. We made an edit or a revision that allowed modification to the development standards during the site plan review process. We never utilized that. It was never used. Like, things that we want to be a rule, are in the code, and things that aren't a rule, we're not putting in the code. And variances are always an option. So that was removed. Like I said, it was never utilized in 2+ years. Anyway. We clarified off-street parking regulations, applicability of off-street parking, modified table 4.1, which is adding minimum parking for new use types, and maximum off-street parking, as well as discretionary parking and parking for unlisted uses. So basically trying to determine, hey, I want to do this, I want to develop this land use, and I want to do X. How much parking do I need? The table really didn't cover every scenario. Not that we want massive parking lots, but some things need some minimum parking requirements. So that was added. Again, a lot of this is based on real use case scenarios too.
And I
Not
wanna
just
add- and we-
making.
and this went all through the planning commission.
All of this, yeah, all
did,
this went
right.
to planning
And
commission,
there
yep.
was, I imagine there was some vigorous conversation regarding parking, or wasn't there?
It was a process. If you know some of the members on the commission, they're very thorough.
Yeah.
And it was a process. But in the end, ultimately, everything before you was recommended from the planning commission.
But if you could just elaborate on, I believe it's 4, as far as the minimum parking for newly added types.
So if we add a use type that wasn't in the code before, it wasn't enumerated, that use type also we needed to think about how much parking does that use type that was never in the code before need. So does that make sense?
Okay, for use type, all right. And then what about, I know there was some conversation about housing and adding additional rooms or additional structure to a house, which would trigger additional parking.
Yep, that's only if it's non-owner occupied rental. if you want to increase density and intensity, again, not regulating blood and family and how many people can live there, we're using the property maintenance code for a common area, and also you have to have an additional off-street parking spot. And this isn't just a direct response to university neighborhoods either, but think about it, like, if you're adding a couple of bedrooms, like, that's gonna add more cars typically, and can the neighborhood support that? Especially our residential zone districts.
Well, how does this affect, so we do regulate owner occupant boarding homes now, right? Like, that's something that we allow? Or did?
Like a rooming house, or?
Yes, but,
It is a use type, yeah, it's allowable in certain,
so how does the parking fit into that? Does it apply to that at all?
yeah, it's,
So I guess because of,
are you asking what would be the parking requirements for if somebody proposed a rooming house today? Is that the question? I'd have to pull it up, to be honest with you. And we can do it if you want, but those have been the same since the code was adopted. So whatever the requirement has been is what it is. Off the top of my head, honestly, I don't know. We'd have to pull it up. But so this is the required off-street parking spaces, and you can see it's got all the uses down the left side and the specific use in the middle, and then it tells you how many spaces you need per square footage. So again, if we added some use types, we added it to the parking requirement table. That's all number 4 means, is that's what we did. I would say it's not necessarily a substantial change. Let's see. So lodging, it wouldn't really fall under that. So group living, you can see boarding and rooming house, none required, but if you're a chapter house, a dorm, or residential care facility, it's 1 space either per bedroom, or for a care facility, it's 1 space per 400 square foot. That hasn't changed.
I would imagine that would need to change, because if I have a 4-bedroom house, I'm the owner, I live there, so there's 3 bedrooms available. You may be able to fit 2 cars in my driveway. That depends on how close the house is. I don't know if that's.
Well, I would also say, I don't know that
Case
we've
by
really,
case.
have we even had any development or establishment of a rooming house? No, so. It's a.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about, someone renting out bedrooms.
Martha Hertzberg, Mayor Hertzberg from Corporation Counsel's Office. Rooming house is a specific type of group living. It's defined in the code, and it is a facility where multiple people live, but they each have like a private room that they can lock, but they have group meals and a common kitchen with a common area. So if you're renting your house out, that's not a boarding house. That's a residential commercial living, the category above that, where you see dwelling, single unit and 2-unit commercial conversions. So where the owner lives there but rents out 4 bedrooms, that would be a commercial use.
But it wouldn't be a conversion. They wouldn't convert anything. They're just renting rooms.
We use the word conversion to refer to taking a single unit dwelling and making it
No, not necessarily. Only if they add bedrooms. But to your point, the parking minimum, there's none required. I mean, I suppose we could make it a requirement. Most residential uses have driveways, so a legal driveway is going to have, I mean, depending on the lot, I guess it varies but there is off-street parking to some extent, and there's on-street too, right? Like, some of it's designated odd even depending on where it is in the city. Some doesn't have odd even at all, meaning you can park anywhere. I mean, I think about single R1 district where I live, most people put their cars in the driveway, but there's some on the street. I don't know. We
I mean, I
could,
guess I just look at it where you may have some, I don't know what we're calling them at this point, but you may have some houses that rent out rooms and they're at capacity. Some people have vehicles and they do have to park on the street. And if you have 3 extra vehicles on the street in front of 1 or 2 properties, along with other houses that had, like, that can create type congestion.
So it's only when you're converting additional space to bedrooms. So what we see a lot is that a dining room gets converted to a bedroom, or a sunroom gets converted to a bedroom, or even the living room. And it's in those circumstances primarily that we're trying to capture an extra parking space, because you're parking beyond what the capacity of the original house would have.
Okay.
A question now would be in bed and breakfast. We had a situation on my street where the homeowner is using the upstairs for bed and breakfast. They come in, they're out of state, they know nothing about odd and even parking. So where does that fall in? The responsibility, because they'll be parked on both sides. They don't know, they're gonna get a ticket. Does that fall on the property owner to notify the person who's gonna go in there? Maybe you don't know, who is going to be responsible.
I mean, I'll say this, a lot of us, we all travel different places in the city, outside the city, like, you got to look at where you're parking, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, that goes for fire hydrants, that goes for handicap loading zones, like, I mean, traffic law, right? I don't-
Right.
So, Jake, do you
I can see
identify the A and B? Have you been able to identify the A and B? Because they all, obviously, they go on social media and advertise all those places. I mean, you know where, in the
yeah.
neighborhoods?
Yeah, so what we're doing is,
Because the reason I asked, we passed that hotel tax, and I was wondering if that's applied, Deputy Mayor, that's applied to those Airbnbs. I think Councilor Williams, it's supposed to be applied,
And the
right?
county legislature just passed the registry, right?
yes, they
Yeah,
did.
2 weeks ago for the short-term rentals.
So short-term rentals is something we've been looking at, I don't know, for a number of years. It's got to rise to the top, and it's rising towards the top. The way that the county just did it, I think, helps us a lot, because that works directly with the company rather than the individual on it, so that we know we can collect those taxes. But we do have an interest in being able to find a way
The
to.
county's been very aggressive, and I think
Yeah.
with the city should be aggressive too. I mean, to Councilor Nave's point, Councilor Jones-Rouser, I mean, they're popping up all over. I got one on my street. There's one right around the corner. There's a couple on Tennyson Avenue too, and I think it's something that I don't particularly care where. I mean, parking in my neighborhood's very difficult anyways, but I think we have to work with people as far as that goes, and if it derives more revenue, I'm probably in favor of a lot of this.
Yeah, I also have an Airbnb that's directly across the street from me, and we're over in the university neighborhood, so parking is a premium, and there's still always space. You're never walking more than a handful of houses to be able to do it. But the odd even is something that I will explain to people, because that is something that not every property owner that does an Airbnb is really good at being able to get that information out. I think the one across the street from me, the guests have told me that it says "pay attention."
Is that considered, Jake? Was that considered commercial then? An Airbnb? Obviously it would if they advertise, right?
Yeah, we would consider an Airbnb residential commercial living. So it's a residential house, but it's commercially being used as a commercial enterprise or business. So, yes.
That's a brave new world, and we're just getting into that, right? More or less.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll bring it up because it's something I think we could look at. But on top of the occupancy tax is like, do you do anything above and beyond that? So But
Are most of those Airbnbs even coming to us though? So if there's people that own 2-unit houses in, I don't know, pick a street, are they even coming anywhere near us when they just go and do it?
right.
Right.
So, do we have a license for it?
Well, do we
Do
make them
we
register?
do something
The county's gonna
else?
make them register is the first question, right? Because if we could just take the county registry and just adapt it to fit our needs and then from there do whatever we want.
It's so, like I said, we've been looking at this a handful of different ways for a long time. Honestly, with the exception of those of us that are like, hey, we know that one is an Airbnb, the companies do not disclose where the address is for the people that buy into the franchise. So it is. We need to do a few different types of research. One is really what have we found to be effective best policy around the country, because there's always great ideas, but fortunately a lot of people have tried those ideas beforehand already and learned which ones actually work and which ones don't. The next then is that mechanism of identification, and from what we've heard from other cities, and we've talked to a number of other cities about this, that's not, I've talked to cities where they simply employ 2-3 people to stay on top of the research, where they look at every listing and then they go look at Street View for every possible house within that area. But that's, you're adding a lot of labor to be able to do it. And so what is a cost-effective way for us to provide good oversight? It's not a quick process to get to what's going to be best for Syracuse.
But to Councilor Hogan's point, I think that maybe the window of opportunity there is to cut the deal with the VRBOs and Airbnb companies that say, like, listen, we're going to allow this and set guardrails, but you're going to have to tell us where they are.
That's where, when we take a look at the rules that are made by other cities, we're able to see what's effective in exactly with that.
I mean, they do this all through social media, so I mean, I think you can identify them.
Well,
from there.
not everybody's advertising with their address. What they do is they advertise a neighborhood.
And there's certain neighborhoods that wouldn't want Airbnbs in their neighborhood.
Yes, there's always going to be that, and so we need to balance. What do we see as best for Syracuse, along with the fact that you're always going to have some people that are going to say, I only stay in Airbnbs, I welcome them in my neighborhood, I own them, I shouldn't be restricted, I don't want to live next to one, right? People are going to fall into roughly one of those 3 categories.
Can I ask a question? I'm just thinking about this because I had went to New Jersey, and when I went to New Jersey, they had some of the Airbnbs on the Strip. But what they did is they sold parking permits to people coming into the Airbnbs. Have we maybe give that a thought?
So I think that's a great conversation to include the Transportation Division at DPW with, because I mean, as we're talking about parking, we know what we need from a building standpoint, but we do always try to make sure that we're talking with our friends at
When I went, you couldn't just park anywhere you wanted to. It was permit parking, and you had to have that parking permit to be able to park in that particular location.
Yeah, and I think that there are some places within the city that we may want to consider that. I would, if you're, downtown, we want to have as much parking available during the day for our businesses. So what does that look like compared to if you're in my neighborhood? Yeah, but parking can be kind of crowded, but I've never not found a spot, and I've been in my house for 30 years. So places where we can think, wow, there's a lot of cars on the street. That still might mean that it's 60% of the capacity is being used, and that we wouldn't necessarily have to create new rules for every neighborhood.
Revenue twofold. You park in that parking spot, you get a ticket. You don't belong there.
But parking in my neighborhood will be very busy on next weekend for the Westcott Cultural Festival. That's when the one day a year when it gets goofy, and so 364 days a year doesn't. That means that we're probably doing okay.
So I just have one ask or comment, I guess, before the Common Council. There's been a lot of discussion about things that I think we need to have discussion on, but aren't part of these specific asks. And I'd like to just see if we could separate those two things, because we can have an amendment whenever, but Airbnbs, additional ADU stuff, parking, housing flexibility, like some of that's not really part of this. directly, and we can certainly have those discussions, we want to, but just to, a lot of the stuff were really more clarification of things and edits of things. Like the last three things I really have to mention are the special use permit, which I talked about. We want to do renewals. That's kind of substantial. We added a substantial rewrite to the rules of measurement, but that's like nerdy stuff. Like how do we measure setbacks? How do we measure heights of buildings? Like just clarifying how we do those measurements, like actually spelling it out.
Well, I had a question on the height, the rules of measurement.
Sure.
How does the new, rules of measurement affect, and maybe it doesn't, the, like, for historic, neighborhoods, how does that affect articles of in-kind development?
I want to make sure I understand. So basically, it just tells us how we measure something. I don't think it's really changing a whole lot exactly, impacting real use or changing what you can and can't do. It just wasn't clear on how we actually calculated certain things within the code, and that's what the section's changing. A historic building being replaced in kind, is that the question?
Yes,
What-
in-kind or in-kind to the neighborhood. Whereas you have, I'll just say on the south side, you have some houses that have new developments that are much lower in height than the previous existing homes, and they're,
Well,
so I'm just
zone,
thinking about the historic neighborhoods, that not happening.
zone districts have regulations for heights of buildings, stories, and it's by zone district. So that should all hopefully already be something that's being regulated, that's been in the code. I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer the question. I'm just kind of like, does anybody have anything else to add?
So, Counselor, I think one of the things, so what I hear you talking about is within historic districts, there's a vacant parcel.
It could be a historic neighborhood, because not all of them are huge districts. It could
Right.
just be a neighborhood, that might be one block that is considered, historic in some fashion, and
So we can get clarification from Kate Allwater, our preservation planner. Generally speaking, if you're within a designated historic area, what it means is either there's tax benefits for making improvements that keep that up, or there may even be restrictions on what you can do. It depends on the designation. To Deputy Commissioner Dishaw's point, so we had, when we adopted this code, we created it, you adopted it about 2.5, little over 2 years ago. We promised you at the time that where the old one, everyone kept referring to the old one is ancient and elderly, and I took offense because it's 5 months older than I was at the time. But the point being, we told you we were going to make iterative changes to it to make sure that this was a living document, and we're continuing to improve it.
We were
Okay, so just
definitely
add
in
that.
favor of being flexible and nimble.
Yes.
The council talked about that quite a bit. As we meet the future, we don't want to be Mormon in this old, zoning regulations. So that's why it passed.
And to that point, we've been before you previously for updates. Here we are again. I think you all are bringing up really important stuff, some of which is on our list, some of which isn't, for the next sets of reviews. So we will continue to do that. I think our request to you is to take a hard look at what's in front of you right now, and if we're good with this, to proceed with this, and we work with you to make sure that future amendments are addressing, continue to address the concerns that you all have. So that's really what we're hoping for out of this right now, that we can take a hard look at what we've got, make sure it meets what it should meet, go forward and continue with future revisions, because we've been before you already. We'll continue to do it.
well, within that question to Kate, just because I know that some districts have been rezoned for more density, and those districts may also overlap with historic districts or neighborhoods. So that's where my concern is, that it may be allowed, but should we do it if the previous properties in this neighborhood are of a certain type?
I think I understand you more. So that, none of that's changing. The preservation section is still applicable. It's not changing at all. I don't think we have anything in that chapter. And so again, the rules of measurement is really more about how you calculate something, not changing what you can have as a height, for example. Like, it wasn't clear if you were on a slope, how to measure the height, for example. That's what we did in Article 7 on rules of measurement. It didn't change what the height can be in a historic neighborhood, for example. That's been what it has been this whole time and is not changing.
Well, you know what I'll do, Jake, is I'll talk to my fellow counselors and we'll decide as far as if we want to go forward like this or we want to have another meeting, so.
Yeah, one last thing I just want all of you to know is we have a really small but mighty zoning team. Most of them are here in attendance. They work tirelessly day in, day out. Many of these changes are from actual use case scenarios where we're trying to get a project through and the code is either unclear or it's not addressed at all. And we've taken notes like, hey, we need to add this. Like, that's where a lot of this comes from. So I just want you all to know that.
That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Like, some things are unclear still. So just.
Yeah, and I apologize if I didn't do a good job answering it. Part of it is I think I didn't understand. And we can talk offline after this,
Well,
but
why don't-
anything that's not
Counselor
included, we're
Jones-
happy to talk
Why
about.
doesn't Counselor Jones-Rouser, or any of the
Yeah.
counselors that have any specific questions, why don't you get them to Jake? And then and copy all of us, so we know what's going on, and then you can get back to us.
Yep, we can do that.
Especially, about historic issues that Counselor Jones-Rouser has and all that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?